And now, have you seen the return of things like, home inspection clauses and financing conditions? And I mean, not too long ago, it was like, what are you talking about conditions?
That's right.
If you want this place, you better not have any conditions.
That's right.
But so those things are kind of starting to come back.
Thankfully, those conditions, along with other conditions that are slowing the process down.
Greetings, friends. This is Jamie Smith, and I'm a Title Plus consultant with LawPro, and this is the In Closing podcast, where I'll be discussing topics important to the real estate community in hopefully a digestible manner. And whether you are a real estate professional, lender, broker, home buyer, lawyer, whatever the case may be, we hope to have some insight from our guests that can help you in your career. In this episode, we'll be discussing ideas on growing and marketing your firm with London lawyer Bassam Lazar. Now, Bassam is absolute wealth of information, fantastic guy, great follow on LinkedIn, so check him out on there. But he is an active member of the Middlesex Law Association, and he has quite an interesting journey and tons of insight on growing your business from the bottom up. So tune in here. Let's jump right into it again. Thank you for joining us on our first episode of the In Closing podcast. Well, this is the first episode of the In Closing podcast. I am Jamie Smith, a Title Plus consultant, and I'm joined today by Bassam Lazar, lawyer based out of London, and very excited to have you. Thanks for doing this here.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
So we've known each other for a little bit, few years going back now. We met at a Middlesex Law Association function. You were fantastic to meet and warm up to. And so, I did some research on you, of course, in doing business together now. And you've had quite the journey professionally, personally, and you've grown your firm, tremendously in what seems like a short period of time, at least that I've known you. So I would just like, to kind of discuss some ideas on marketing your firm, starting up your firm, things that a lot of folks can kind of take away, and just kind of talk about you a little bit. So for those who don't know you, why don't you kind of tell them about your personal and professional journey?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, again, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So personally, we came to this country in 1993. So on a really personal level, we came here as government-sponsored refugees. So this is, for good or for bad, it's not unique. That is a big proportion of how people arrive here.
Sure.
So very fortunate to be here and arriving here safely with the rest of the family. And from there, it was pretty much the same as other trajectories of immigrants. So we worked as much as we could, and our parents did their best to put us into schooling. So we grew up in the city of London. We were supposed to be in Toronto initially. We ended up in London, and it's been...
I read that. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it got to us as kids at the time, but the word gets around as to where you're going to end up. So we arrived in Toronto. We're thinking we're going to hang around. We don't even know what Toronto is. And then we were ushered to the city of London here. So 93, we arrived here. And from there, it was the government agencies playing a role in helping us get comfortable here, get the kids into schools, etc. So it was exciting. As much as it was painful initially to leave the old country, arriving here, being helped around by so many people was incredible. Sure. And from there, it was elementary school and high school, etc. And that was an interesting time as well. But I always wanted to be a lawyer. I hate to throw that around, but parents got inspired me to be a lawyer. And so I stuck to it as much as I could. And eventually made that become true, and this is 30 years later now. So 30 years later, lots has happened, and professionally was blessed to be accepted into Western as an undergrad, then Windsor Law, and then having graduated from there, ended up back in London. I mean, it wasn't a plan to end up here, but we ended up back here, and it's been a great journey so far.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I guess from getting out of school, you already said you've always wanted to be a lawyer, so you knew exactly what the plan was. It wasn't like when I was coming home from school, my dad's on the ride home, he's like, all right, so what now?
Yeah.
Literally graduation day, driving me home. All right, what now? I'm like, well, I don't know. He's like, well, you better find a way or make one, right? But so once you got out of school, was it right away diving into starting the practice and getting things going? Like, how did you kind of get your feet on the ground and start marketing yourself and start driving business through your door?
It's a tough one, generally for lawyers. I wish there was a script for us.
Right.
I mean, we don't come out of law school with a script from the law school telling us how to grow, et cetera.
Yeah.
So law school has a limited role, and I think they've got a lot of work to do in expanding that. That's a subject on its own.
Yeah.
But coming out of law school, your goal is to get articling, and that's part of being a lawyer. So you go to law school, you pass the bar, and then you article, which is your apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So initially it was just to get articling and be a lawyer, and then hopefully go into the area that you love. So initially it was environmental law, but coming out of that, articling, et cetera, at some point you are figuring out yourself, who you are, and how do you want to practice as an individual. And some personalities aren't made to work in a big firms. And so a lot of it for lawyers, it's figuring out who they want to be going forward.
Sure.
And a big part of that is also looking around us. We look at the lawyers that we're working with, senior lawyers, and we I thought to myself, do I want to do this or that? And so that was tremendous in helping me get a perspective on what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But about 2 or 3 years out as being a lawyer, I went out on my own.
Gotcha.
So that was for the second time, and I wish I knew a couple of things now that I did then. So I went out on my own. It was simply getting out and trumping up business. As much as simple as that sounds, it's like a candidate running for elections. You got to knock on doors and do these things. So we're doing that in a lot of ways, right? We're not literally knocking on doors, but I'm networking.
Right.
I am figuring out the systems. I'm figuring out the processes.
Definitely.
But at the heart of it, I need revenue to help my family.
For sure. And so because that kind of takes me into, you mentioned your articling phase, and I imagine at that point in time you had some, some mentors that maybe helped you out, and you were building your network. But then also, even when you're out on your own, there was still that importance on networking and finding different funnels and channels to draw business from, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it too, my law school experience was quite, needless to say, our experiences are different in the same settings.
Sure.
So in law school, I've got friends that we were very close together, but our experiences were different because they emphasized certain things and I did other things. So my experience in law school was to get out.
Right.
There were lots of social justice issues that we were part of, protests, bringing people together, collaborating, protesting, as I mentioned, but doing it on different levels with students and all that sort of stuff. So I had a personality at that time coming out of law school that was probably easier to do what I'm doing now than a lot of other friends that I have that I don't see them doing it as much, or it takes them a little longer.
Yes.
So that was tremendous in helping me get out and network and not be shy about this or that. And I'm sure there's other things to that type of personality, like the customer service work that I did back in the day. But I think coming out of law school, it's one thing to say what I want to do, and it's one thing to say I've got mentors that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But a big part of it is how have you been shaped?
Sure.
And I think I was shaped in such a way that it worked nicely for what I wanted to do, which was get out there, shake hands,
definitely,
make friends, build relationships. And I can tell you in that time, it hasn't been just business. It's been business people turning into great friends too.
That's awesome because like I even read. I was watching the video. You're speaking on YouTube, the Journeys of Migration series. Go check that out. And there was one statement there where you said the beauty of the journey is the people involved. So I think like that's a powerful statement that definitely, having that mindset and being out and willing to knock on those doors and make new connections, but having that mindset that, the benefit is not necessarily the outcome of this relationship, but, the interaction you're having with this person, their role in your journey, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's fantastic, and something that a lot of people can take away, whether it's this business, whether it's any business, whether it's in your personal life. There's a lot of benefit to just kind of opening your heart and being willing to reach, and a lot of times folks will reach back.
Just
right?
connecting with people.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't take much to do that, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure in your experiences as well, it doesn't take much to just connect with someone and see how they're doing.
100%. And a lot of times that personal bridge opens up the professional relationship as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I know some people try to separate that as much as they can, but it seems inevitable sometimes. You've got good people, some chemistry, you want to help out each other, you become friends. And I'm sure you've seen that as well in your evolution as a professional. I know in my evolution as a professional, that's definitely been the case.
For sure. And now, so the folks that you're, I guess, building your network with, is it mostly other lawyers? Is it real estate agents, brokers, surveyors, developers, everyone?
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them. Because depending on what you're in. So, it's difficult talking about as a business because it does come across as a little cold. But in my area of practice, at least what I've tried to do is always have perspective, step back and take stock of things. And I always talk about gatekeepers.
Sure.
So for me, as a real estate and business lawyer, I can't reach out to every home buyer.
Sure.
But I can reach to the gatekeepers that are realtors, brokers, etc., and they open up the doors to their clients. But certainly, what I have right now, people will say, "Hey, Bassam, great practice," and et cetera, et cetera. But it really is a product of the people, all these people, right? And so, and it's incredible because it's not just about that person as being an end by any means. It's a human being you interact with, you learn from, but also they open up the doors to so many other doors that I've never thought about. So I've reflected on people this way as well, where I've said, I've been going down these few paths because of this single decision with this individual where I met at this event and we took a few minutes to chit chat.
Yeah.
Right. Then I became a guest at his networking group. Then I met 4 or 5 other people that have been instrumental in my life, not just good, but instrumental. Yeah. And so on and so forth. So all it took was this event that we were at. So I think we're all doing that. We just have to take stock of it and realize that we are being shaped constantly by these little decisions that we make in other people.
So definitely, would you say a piece of advice for someone, whether they're younger or they're getting into this line of business later in life, that an important thing for them is to maybe join some associations or professional networks that you're talking about, right? Where again, whether it's somebody directly related to their field or not, they might open your mind up to something maybe that you're not thinking of or honing in on that can advance your career.
And I'm sure you've seen it as well, attending different events. Like had it not been my attendance at this golf event on that day, I probably would have met Jamie.
Yeah, well, I would have probably bugged you and sent you a bunch of emails, and you would be like, "Who is this guy?"
But it would have been different. But that was I think the first time I met you there.
Yeah.
But absolutely, like as uncomfortable as it is, and I don't know if you're, regardless of the professional, you've got to get out. I know there are areas of business out there where you can just have SEO, and Google will take care of it for you.
Right.
Our line of business, and most of the professionals that we deal with, you've got to get out there and chit chat with people and really think about not just what you're trying to get out of it. I know we're beating this horse to death here, but it's just getting to know that human being. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes you just know that the chemistry isn't there either. Right. And there's no point in wasting your time because you don't get along. So it's not about what you're not trying to get out of each other. And I've got lots of friends that I've met through the business networks. We don't do business with each other. Right. We're great friends. So I think that's something to keep in mind starting out.
Not so much weight on the professional outcome, but just gotcha.
Yeah, I hope people starting out their business or trying to build something, they're not thinking, all right, as soon as I don't get something from here, I disconnect. I think that's one of the worst things I've seen. But so on that point, it's really important, needless to say, to reinvigorate that relationship.
Right.
Right. Connect with that human being and share some of the things that you have in your professional world or personal world.
Sure.
So recently we had a thank you event.
Right.
So I'll typically do this maybe twice a year. So it was the summer thanks. It's an expression of gratitude, as we put it. So it's bringing all the people in, and I'm sorry you weren't invited.
I know. I was going to say, like, when did this take place? Like, what's going on
This is
here?
where you don't talk about certain things, because the next thing is, I'm sorry I didn't invite you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Next
so
time, I
I'm
guess.
sorry.
All right.
And this is where I've got to think more about it. But it was an event to say thanks to all the people that have helped us.
Right.
And some of them still find it odd because it doesn't happen enough. I'm like, of course, just come in, have food, have a drink, whatever it is that you want to do, and network with people. So we had about 30 people come out at a nice event. But it's a way to say to them, thank you for being part of my life. Essentially, that's what it is.
Yes.
You've chosen to be part of my life.
Right.
And you could be part of someone else's life. And it's also about renewing that relationship.
Right, sure.
And I think that's sometimes more critical than anything else, right? You
Yeah.
got to renew that relationship, because we do get, right, just like a little comet being attracted to some other gravitational pull. It will happen with people as well.
For sure, gradually, if anything, yeah.
And that's why you're there. Title Plus will be there for us instead of us being pulled to other gravitational pulls, right?
You heard that from him. I didn't say that. It's from him, but we appreciate you. So I guess just circling back to where you mentioned, you're talking about SEO and things like that. So, of course, the personal touch is what you focus on. But of course, these passive tools like SEO and social media, that sort of thing, are important as well, right? Now, you're very active on LinkedIn, which it's fantastic. Go follow him on LinkedIn. It's a great follow.
Thank you.
And so I was just wondering, is there particular content or social media, one platform versus another that you find comfort in, or because I'm a millennial essentially. I refer to myself as an '80s baby, but technically, yeah, I'm a millennial, and we're attracted to these things, right? A lot of the times we feel comfortable doing our own discovery, and hey, this person's not speaking about this. I'll follow that on social, and then that'll open my eyes to the folks who are in that business and what have you, right?
Yeah.
So we're comfortable doing that discovery our own. So how do you essentially market, or is there a particular attention you pay to folks like me in my demographic?
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, because part of it is if we start advertising through certain traditional methods, not traditional, but the newer traditional methods, SEO, Google, Facebook. I guess the challenge that we've had in the past is that you're just getting a bunch of phone calls coming in. And there's a bunch of things going on over the phone, and we get into certain interesting retainer relationships. And so that's been interesting for us not to revisit. So what we try to focus on is the personal.
Sure, okay.
I know it's tried and tested, but it works out for me. It works out for the office. So at a minimum, I keep in touch with the professionals we deal with.
Sure.
At a minimum. So we'll go out for coffees, lunches. We'll touch base on certain issues that come up. It's easier to talk about a mutual client. If you know the person very well, you can hold each other to account. So I focus on that, on the person, and so I do remind myself of reaching out to them, etc. Now, on the social media front and advertising, we have a magazine that we advertise in. We try to be different, and it works. It's the only real estate magazine in the region. We're in it, and it helps us a lot.
Nice.
Social media, you've mentioned LinkedIn, and that's great. That's great personally. We've got our law practice on there as well. We don't have a Facebook advertising strategy. We don't have Google advertising strategy for different reasons. So we try to work on the organic side of it. And it's helped. So we get a lot of clients calling us in, and I'll ask them, how'd you find us? Online.
Right.
And there's no advertising going on online. So for our particular practice, a big part of it, I'm not saying that this is the way it's going to be for the person starting out, but for us, we've built that social capital, that reputation online, so there's enough algorithms picking up our information.
Sure.
So we do end up on their radar somehow.
Yeah.
But it's a combination of marketing to the people that we know.
Right.
Staying active on LinkedIn, which is what people expect me to do as I'm on there.
Yes.
And then trying to look at different things. And that's a whole other discussion that we can have about how to trump up more business.
So it's really a combination of that digital touch, focusing more heavily on the personal, but that digital touch still gets the eyes on you, right? And then you can kind of qualify that relationship from there, and then transition into a personal one that is longer lasting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about the strategy. I think if you approach a different firm with the similar services provided, they'll say we have a different strategy, and it works for them.
And exactly,
it's comfortable for them. That lawyer we mentioned about personalities.
Yes.
That lawyer may not be comfortable getting out like I do.
Right.
So that's quite different strategy,
Yep.
and I respect that.
And
as
that's
well.
that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't have to be cookie cutter. And of
Yeah.
course, we might be providing advice. We're kind of more so just having a conversation about what works for you, maybe what doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And that might be gold for somebody else, but not really work for another representative, right?
100%.
But you can maybe pull one thing here, and then put it together and say, okay, this is me. This is what works for me, and then head on, right?
Is that similar with? I'm sure you guys have similar discussions, right, on how to get out there and what's the most effective way to reach out people.
Yeah, and it really is a combination. Most of our focus is just like you on the personal side, right? You want to get the eyes, you want to get the attention. Sometimes you need the digital tools to help you out with that.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get, I might get a random email or somebody checks out our website and hey, I'd like more information about Title Plus, and that's great. But I know that immediately I got to develop the personal touch with them, and because that is what is going to earn my client, right? Or at least that's what I find. People want to do business with people that they like, right? So I try to develop that personal bond, or build that bridge first, and then say, okay, how can we help each other, and how can we build this together, right? Which is kind of like what happened with you and I, because initially.
100%.
You had let me know your position at that point in time, and I said, okay, is it okay if we work toward building our profile to where there might be a match here, and you were open to that, and then once we got to that level and enhanced some things, you gave us a shot, and you were a man to your word, you gave us a shot, and essentially the rest is history, right? So
absolutely.
Again, that's pretty much our focus, and but I think that's a good piece for a lot of people to know and hear, and even if you're feeling like you're not doing enough digitally, as long as you're focused on that personal side, you can grab that at any time, right?
Agreed, because that person has the networking as well, right? They're a force of their own with different people. But on that point again, I think a testament to what we're talking about is, Jamie, you've been fantastic for us. I'll just tell you from my perspective as a recipient of a service.
Yeah.
Because we've had experiences with great products to try to be sold to us, let's say on the corporate side. It hasn't worked out because the servicing was awful. Great product, awful servicing. But I know with us, you've been fantastic because you've been there to answer questions. You've been incredibly patient. We have been difficult to kind of get on a platform, etc.
Again, you heard it from him, not from...
Yeah, no, I'll say it because I've been on the other side as well with clients. But despite all of that, you've been understanding. You've been, and this is important to me, you have not been a dead end. I try not to be a dead end for a potential client. So either I help them or put them to somebody. And similarly, you've been that. So that has helped us really to be reassured that we can continue on improving that relationship. So a testament to that. The other thing I learned in politics was at least be the second choice. So knock on a door, even if they got someone voted, be so kind and respectful and present such a real substance to who you are as to be the second choice. And I think, we were dealing with a certain title insurer, good people, etc., had some reservations, and you're right there. And so that helped us a lot in making that decision.
That's great. I hope my manager is listening right now.
It's being recorded.
Great. Hey, look at this. Look what Tom said about me.
Great human being behind the camera recording it. So there you go. We got to give a shout out to Chris as well.
Chris Aussie is my guy. Okay, so I guess what I wanted to do was pretty much encompass how you differentiate yourself. And of course, again, we're talking a lot about the personal side, and obviously you're a great guy, so who wouldn't like you, right, or want to do business with you? But I remember when I was buying my first house, my father said, well, I got a lawyer for you. And then my real estate agent was like, well, I got a lawyer for me. You should use this guy. And I was like, well, I know someone who, I went to school with, and they're a lawyer, so why don't I give them a shot? So how would you distinguish yourself or differentiate yourself from, again, my father's lawyer versus the real estate agent's lawyer versus my own choice?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but there's a couple of important lessons here. One, and I'll elaborate on them, is to present the best side of yourself and what you believe in. And then two, don't bring disrepute to the profession. So on the first end, if someone reaches out to me, I will give it all. I will reach out to them, answer their questions. It sounds rather simple, but you'd be surprised at the amount of people that reach out for a product and there's a failure to at least acknowledge their existence. So I reach out to the person, if it's via email or via phone call. We'll reach out to them, answer the questions, introduce myself or ourselves, and be as transparent as possible with their about their questions. And then critically, people talk about budgeting and pricing, so we're very transparent that way. There's an issue in certain professions, and I think in certain areas in law as well, about transparency of pricing, and so we are upfront about that. We'll tell them we're going to send you a fee structure so you have an idea about this,
Where
and there's
no
surprises. So that's very important,
Sure.
and I think that comes across as honest. And so I try to be educational too. So I'll tell them, hey, if you're going to reach out to other law offices, make sure these are the questions you ask. So don't ask about a legal fee, for example, in real estate.
Yeah.
Ask about the total costs. That'll give you an accurate picture of what it will cost you. So in a nutshell, I try to be as transparent and honest about it. And the other part of it is I don't engage in, sometimes we'll get this, right? Someone will call in, here's what I heard from the other law office. I do not engage in a race to the bottom. So I want to make sure that the reputation of the profession is good. I want to make sure that the individual on the other side is knowing that we're focusing on the services. And we're transparent about the pricing, as I mentioned.
Right.
So I try to focus on the larger picture of the profession. So I'll do that, and that can only go so far.
Sure.
How they're influenced by other people is a different story, and that has worked in a lot of ways, and in a lot of other ways it hasn't helped. And we just had a individual message us, hey, I know I said we're going to go with you guys, but my dad said I should go to our own lawyer. So you're going to get those as well, where they change their mind, et cetera. But there's only so much you can do to advance who you are.
And what I'd like to think is that even kind of maybe goes back to, hey, you know, what you mentioned about being the second choice, right?
Right.
So where you felt, you know, because kind of while you were speaking there, I was thinking, okay, maybe that's the difference between, you know, earning business and just accepting business, right?
Well said. That's a great distinction.
Yeah, and because again, like that, you know, the gentleman or lady that you were helping there, and they said, oh, we'll go with our, you know, our family lawyer. God forbid that lawyer drops the ball, or they say, hey, you know what, mom and dad, like I didn't really like how they handled this, so I'm going to go back to the drawing board here. And you know what, and that Mr. Lazar, he was, you know, very helpful and gave me the whole rundown and gave me information that I can still use and take, you know, elsewhere. So you know what, I'm going to go back to him because he seems like a great guy and you know, great practice, that sort of thing, right? So that's what I mean is that, like, you know, you of course you're in a position to accept the business, but you've potentially earned future business even though you didn't get that business initially.
That's a great point. I mean, we've seen that as well. That's a great point where people have said, hey, we didn't go with you on this, and we just thought you guys were great initially. We'll come back to you. So absolutely, it pays dividends down the road.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that you would do differently? Like, at the beginning you kind of mentioned, there's some things. Like, is there anything in particular, you know, that you might do differently, and how, you know, could any of these instances been avoided?
Yeah. Like starting out the business, etc. A lot. A lot. So it really depends on where you're coming out. But generally speaking, it sounds cliche, but you got to have a plan. You got to have a plan. And the plan helps you put things that you may have forgotten about.
Sure.
So generally speaking, if I can go back in time, I'd have a plan about the business. All right, what's my objective here in 5 months, a year? And what I mean by that specifically is things like personnel. Do I expect people to come into the office when? And I've got to stay true to those execution dates.
Sure.
And so that's something that I would generally recommend to people. If you have a problem with it, there are business centers that will help you develop that. So that's one. I think two, in terms of a mentorship, I would put a little more emphasis on it. I had some great people to reach out to, but I would make sure going out I had the people that I needed to go to in difficult times.
Sure.
So that relates to the other point, which is competence. You know, are we ever fully competent in what we provide and the services we provide? But we can certainly say that depending on years you're out, that will have a large impact on how much you know. So I would say to people going out, be sure that you're sufficiently competent to be out there and servicing people on something so important, whatever area of law it is. And that's the mentorship part, right? You want those people to help you out with that. And unrelated to that, and maybe back to the business plan, systems and processes. It took me a while to build the systems and processes that I have. I would speak mentors, but specifically people that are on their own. Speak to them. Don't try to reinvent the wheel in the things that have already been done, right? There's no use in that. I would have probably focused more on building competence and knowledge and getting out there as opposed to being obsessed with figuring out every system and process of a law practice or a business. So I would have spoken to someone who's already out there and say, listen, what do we do here at the outset? What do I need to set up? What are the subscriptions that I need, all the way to the finished product?
Gotcha.
And that may involve an accountant or a bookkeeper.
Right.
Right. So you've got the plan generally that will help you with these. You've got the mentors in place.
Yeah.
You've got the systems and processes that someone may have. And that'll involve different individuals, other lawyers, accountants, etc. All of it so that you can mitigate potential damage, all that sort of stuff. So those are the overarching general stuff that I would have done differently.
Yeah, no, and that's great because I was thinking too, like once you have that plan and then you have the mentor, then the mentor can kind of oversee your plan and say, hey, okay, at this stage, this is where you might want to, hey, look at the accountant, or hey, here's typically where I started looking at hiring personnel, so you might want to review that at this point.
Absolutely.
And, they can kind of help you. You've built this map essentially, but they can show you the way.
Or they didn't do, and they say, we didn't do it. We messed up. We should have done that, and you should do that.
Right.
So absolutely, I think those are. I think it's a little painful for people to ponder these things. I know it is for me. I just want to jump in and start something. Which is okay. Energy is good, and you want to get moving. But my goodness, taking stock of things and figuring out the landscape before you jump into it will certainly help you.
Yeah.
I know for me, 2-3 years later, there were lots of things that I needed fixing, and I had a fantastic bookkeeper that came in. She was incredible. And she attended to those things, but it took a while because of not being focused on that, right? And I can tell you, if I go back in time, I would love to help people with that as well, just to give them a general outline of that, because it does, needless to say, pay dividends down the road.
Sure.
But also save some potential serious issues for a professional like a lawyer.
Definitely. Okay.
So,
Good stuff. You've given us some very good gems here. Actually, I wanted to mention one thing because you had posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm just pulling it up here. Your
post
your
a lot
post.
on there.
You had a poll that I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about the ebbs and flows of real estate in today's landscape, and it's crazy. And the question that you posed was this. You said this real estate reset is taking a toll on purchasers, sellers, and all of the professionals involved. What is your primary concern? So you posted that out there, and it was a very mixed. There were 4 different options. Lenders abandoning buyers, buyers poorly prepared, sellers abandoned by buyers, and all of the above and more. And it was a pretty even distribution.
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting. What have you found? Kind of the one aspect or the combination of aspects that has really left people unsettled right now?
Well, first of all, that we talked about earlier before this started, that depending on the professional, it was interesting how they were grouped in the answers.
Yes.
So it depends on their perspective, and they have they're privy to information that we're not. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, are a lot of individuals that bought at the height, and they're holding the bag. And so they saw what everyone else was seeing, which this hyperbolic rise of valuation. And it's wonderful as long as there's another buyer for the product.
Right.
So lots of folks benefited from this, but what we've seen on the ground in this office is a combination of things that are just making the situation difficult for someone. So someone buys at the height of the market, so that's strike 1. Strike 2, they sell months later when the market has dipped dramatically.
Right.
So that's strike 2. And that's important because the purchase was premised on an assumption they will sell the property for a certain price and pull that money for that purchase.
Right.
So they don't sell for the price. They sell for $200,000-300,000 less. The third strike, you go to the lender, and lender says, yes, you've bought it for this price. I know the market was good at the time, but our valuation is about $200,000-300,000 less. Third strike. So you have a client now saying, I bought at the max price, I've sold at the lower end, and now I've got a lender that's saying, I'm not going to give you the money that you thought you were going to get.
Right.
So this combination is coming together in our office, and we've seen people terminate agreements for consideration. So we've paid the seller a certain amount of money to say,
to get out.
We'll mutually release each other, and you can do as you please. We've seen clients go get out of retirement, get back into the profession to help with lender approval.
Wow.
We've seen that as well. We've seen people jump into more difficult financing
Right,
try
like
to push
secondary
the deal.
lenders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose the deposit substantial amount. And also, don't forget, right? There were when you've got a hot commodity, lots of traditional checks and balances are out the window, so deposits increase dramatically.
Yes.
So there's a bigger reason for the buyer not to walk away now. They'll
Right.
do anything they can to not lose 50,000 or 100,000. So we've seen a combination of things.
Yeah.
And obviously, some people say it was expected or a reset was required, but it was going at a pace where it was becoming unbearable for everyone involved. And, for good or for bad, it happened.
Yeah, and now have you seen the return of things like, home inspection clauses and financing conditions? And 'cause I mean, not too long ago, it was like, what are you talking about conditions?
That's right.
If you want this place, you better not have any conditions.
That's right.
But so those things are kind of starting to come back.
Thankfully, those conditions, along with other conditions that are slowing the process down.
Yeah.
So one, the process is being slowed down a little more. So one of the big things we saw was, imagine this is the table, that's the timeline for a real estate transaction. It was crunched up into this.
Right.
Because of last minute financing or the seller wanted to sell quicker, et cetera. So yes, we're seeing more conditions come back, and that's nice.
Right.
To protect people and making sure that they may have this right to step out of the transaction for different reasons. And generally, we're seeing a calming of things. So we'll see what happens in a year or 5 months.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, right? And I'm sure you'll post more content on this. And again, everyone, follow him on LinkedIn. He's
Thank you, Jamie.
fantastic. Are there any other channels that they should be paying attention to? Or I know you guys have some content on your website too, an article section.
Yeah.
I think Madeline just put something up on there.
Yeah.
Check that out.
Yeah.
But this has been great. Thank you for joining us
Thank
on
you.
the first episode 1.
I'm honored.
Of In Closing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor. There's a gentleman again behind the camera who's done a fantastic job as well. It's been an honor working with you and Title Plus. It really has been, and so we thank you for that. And hopefully this flourishes. It will flourish. You'll do incredible things. Thanks for putting me on the hot seat as being the first guest.
Yes.
But honored to be here. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks so much, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.